Radio City Center Stage.
So how has the industry been impacted over these months? I first want to ask professionally, then I'll get to personally.
It's actually been a very difficult time because obviously we all understand the health concerns of COVID, but the less said fact is the economic aspect of it, right? The Indian economy in particular and the world over, this probably could be the worst economic crisis after maybe the World War One, Great Depression.
Yes.
And so while most people would tend to see that as negative, and it is a negative because of a huge issues, as an entrepreneur, I tend to see it as a positive because what that means is that although it's doom and gloom for a regular kind of activity that you might be doing, if you think differently, it opens up a lot of opportunities, right? So, for example, if you're a if you're a Kirana store owner and people can't really walk into your supermarkets anymore, right? But at the same time, home delivery has now become immensely popular, right? Or WhatsApp ordering, or if you're like you have a school tuition business, and suddenly everything is on WhatsApp, and online education has become immensely popular. So, while COVID has definitely created a huge amounts of issues in the economy, it has also opened up new opportunities. And that's the way I like to think about it, right? What can go right versus what can go wrong.
Yeah, because the reason I started with this question for you is because the home delivery business, and especially people ordering non-vegetarian food, especially in, say, North India, where I come from, it's not something that we would generally go and order online, right? It is possibly the time when I have seen, I think literally all my family and friends try online food ordering of chicken, fish, meat for the first time. Otherwise, you would go to the butcher in the morning, you would choose what things you wanted, and it was like that. So I think for the whole food industry business or the online retail business, it's been a big boon. For
It's definitely been a huge tailwind for the online business. In particular, our Guinea is actually much more has empowered women because if you look at it, if you go to all these, let's say in like all these fish markets, like if you go to Chitranjan Park or Gazipur Mandi or so on, you would not see women going there because one, the whole sanitary conditions of a wet market is so pathetic, and sort of the way that you store fish or meat is so bad that even men find it really difficult to go in there in the morning. But what we see is that about 55% of our audience who buy from us are all women. So, at the end of the day, we would see that a woman would definitely be involved in decision making on what exactly is involved, but would not be actually going to the wet market. So, what online fish and meat is really empowered is for women to actually make their choice online, right? And men also, but women much more. This is an interesting perspective that I learned in the last 3 months.
I think that's a very interesting perspective. I don't think that's come out anywhere.
I mean, the delivery and the convenience is a huge aspect of it, but much more than that. And the way that I started the business is really about thinking about food without chemicals, because the key aspect of fresh to home. And I come from an IT industry. I was a CEO for a bunch of different software companies, and in my last job, I used to make games. I don't know if you played some of the.
Yes.
Yeah, I used to do Farmville, Mafia Wars, poker. I don't know if you played my the games that I've made.
It's very, very addictive. But my point is, how did somebody who's doing that go to an industry of food products online, especially? It's got something to do with your love with fish and rice. I know, I heard that.
I mean, I definitely love my fish and rice, and that's a huge part of it. So, but if you look at it, this started out in 2015, right? So this time when I was, running a really large gaming company. It was one of the world's largest. After Google, we were second largest IPO in 2011, and I was in San Francisco, and then later I moved back to Bangalore. And at that time, I used to actually buy fish from a site called as seed2home.com, which was started by my current co-founder. And I used to be just a customer of the site, and I really used to enjoy the quality, and I used to like my fish and rice so much that I like to eat all the marine fish, which is very hard to get in Bangalore at that time. And then all of a sudden, particularly after I had my kids, the whole thing about eating healthy and having, antibiotic-free chicken or, chemical-free fish became a really big thing for me, right? I know earlier when I was a bachelor or the early days, it didn't really dawn upon me. But once you start having kids, this whole thing gets into you on what are you really eating? And I became more and more enamored with the subject that at some point I decided that the best thing to do was to stop making virtual tomatoes and potatoes in Farmville and actually go down to the fishermen and farmers. And that's how I met my current co-founder, Matthew, who essentially to do this C2 home business. We joined hands towards the end of sort of 2015. And I initially became an angel investor to him because I've had reasonable amount of entrepreneurial experience in the Valley, and particularly in the US. And I was actually not looking to do another gig, but this was so much of a passion to me to give people food without poison. That my mission of trying to do something much more meaningful than wealth creation really triggered with the whole founding principles of what Matthew was doing. And together we started a much more larger firm. Matthew was earlier about fish, and then we started vertically integrating chicken because we found that drug resistance, right? Antibiotic drug resistance is a huge issue in India today. If you look at sort of the kind of antibiotics fed to the chicken, what that means is if it actually goes into the human beings, the amount of medicines that you require to recover from any kind of normal infection and your immunity goes for a toss, right? And these are some of the well-known facts that are malpractices in the meat industry, but nobody really used to talk about it because meat always used to be about hush hush and going something in a black hour, particularly in NCR, and coming back home, right? So we wanted to change that. We wanted to bring it to be a very safe, very extremely hygienic process. So what we did was to go back to the source. So we went to the fishermen, we went to the farmers, we went all the way up. We started vertically integrating that entire supply chain. And then we created a business based on quality and freshness and lack of chemicals. The lack of chemicals one is very important, right? Because nobody, at least to my knowledge, does lab tests on the products and then displays it on their site. If you go to our website, you can see test results for the latest batch chicken that we've bought, right? And we will test for about 120 varieties of antibiotics and various different microorganisms and so on. And similarly for formalin or ammonia or chlorine or other parts of other common contaminants in the supply chain for fish and bunch of other products. This is our quality guarantee to the product, to the customer. And that's the reason why we've grown tremendously. From say 1,000 orders a day in earlier 2-3 years back, we've grown to about 1 million orders now per month. It's about 10 lakh orders per month. And we are now the world's largest in the fish and meat industry, online fish and meat industry.
Yeah. But it's fascinating because I think we also turn a blind eye towards it because even if you've heard of things, you're like, it's okay, it's chicken and fish. But to know that at least it's safe to eat because initially I remember people had become very conscious of the milk that they were getting. And therefore, a lot of brands then started advertising that we're doing tests and these are our test results. I think yours was the first one to actually show that for chicken and for fish as well.
That's correct. It's very hard to do that for fish and chicken, and that's the reason why other brands are finding it harder to do that. Because you could get fish from anywhere from 5,000 different harbors in India. Basically, the fragmentation in the supply chain due to the middlemen who add exploitation to the fishermen and farmers, but also prevent sort of a quality product is the main reason why it was harder to do this. Now, we took a lot of time. We took at least 2-3 years to actually backward integrate this entire supply chain. And that's why we are able to stand by that. And as a consumer, the biggest thing right now is about education, right? Because most people are comfortable walking to the mutton stall and they would see the mutton hanging from morning to evening with no separate chilling or protection, right? They would sprinkle some water on it on regular intervals. That's a common sight in any butcher shop you go. But if you ask any sort of food safety folks, they'll tell you that within 30 minutes, bacterial contamination goes to a level where it's infectious to health. And think about it, at 8 hours to 10 hours in a day, the mutton would be hanging there and we are going there happily and buying that meat. So essentially, it's really about also changing our perspective, right? Changing our perspective that going to a chilled supply chain and preserving it in a 0 degree centigrade, make sure that there is no antibiotic growth, particularly in this COVID time. Taking care of our immunity and taking care of making sure that there's no secondary infections of any sort is very critical. And that's a key reason why we've witnessed a huge amount of growth because people are moving away from an unorganized market into a much more safer and easier organized marketplace.
This is lovely. I mean, so much. Does that make it very more expensive for you guys?
No, we are basically at the same price as
The whole
the
cost
local
is
neighborhood store.
become
No,
more.
the main reason is that typically when you look at it, any supply chain will have at least 3 to 4 middlemen, right?
Huh.
And these middlemen not just add quality, like I mentioned earlier, but they also add price increase. Because we are cutting off this middleman, we can still sell at the same price as the wet market, and yet it's a much more premium product and free from any kind of antibiotics or chemicals, and it's processed in a much more scientific manner.
Okay, so Sean, you as a person, who are you as a person? What do you like as a person?
I'm a people person. I essentially like to work with people, talk to people. I'm not really a huge extrovert, but at the same time, working with people, talking to them is really my leadership style, right? Because if you look at it, particularly running a large company, most people think that it's about processes and figuring out how to scale organizations and so on. But my favorite question to my folks is really, have you had coffee with X or Y in your team, right? It's really that one-on-one connection, and then talking to people is really is defines me as a personality, right? And me as a leader, and that is really a key aspect of who Shan is, and that's one of the things that you will see across the organization, right? Because that culture has permeated across various facets of the organization.
I think it's very important because slowly as organizations grow, I realize that they become more structural. All the policies are in place, but they sort of lose the human touch because it's just becoming bigger, bigger, bigger. And I think it's very essential that you, at least amongst all of the people I've worked with, if your boss actually bothers to have a conversation with you, it's totally worth it. And it's great if it's not necessarily just about work, but to listen to newer ideas coming in, which is sort of rare.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it,
Okay.
it
Sorry.
go on, please. No, go on.
No, go on.
Now, the other aspect to it is essentially the key aspect to anybody into home is that we follow this whole vision that everybody is their own CEO, which means that we don't really micromanage, right? We really give a task or a project or a goal at a goal level, and then we'd like you to not be sort of give you a goal, and then if you're able to achieve it, we are like you to achieve it quickly. But if you are not able to achieve it, because if you fail slowly, then the cost to the organization is much larger than when you fail fast, right? Because if you fail fast, you can change your plans or come back to the backup plans and so on. That's what defines the DNA of the organization. It's all about testing innovation and then bringing up new ideas and trying them out.
Valid point. Shan, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I sort of figure how you do so well with people. You're very warm, easy to have a conversation with. And I hope everybody who's becoming a boss soon realizes that people ultimately will be the only core strength that you have, one of the biggest core strengths. And everybody should invest in people as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.